comments, and I now yield to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the written testimony of cybersecurity expert Troy Newman of Cyber 5.
Without objection.
Ms. Wynn, Mr. Newman has advised myself and other members of this committee that a simple software uninstall cannot guarantee that all components of the application are removed. He elaborated that the best, most secure software removal process for remediation of threat is first an immediate uninstall and then a scheduled complete hard drive replacement. Can you briefly elaborate for those of us that don't understand things of this nature why a simple software uninstall is insufficient and why complete hard drive replacement is the best solution?
Thank you for your question. I would have to take that back to some serious experts in terms of hard drive management and truly erasing software and breadcrumbs and footprints associated with that software that get left behind on hard drives. What I can speak to is that NASA takes very seriously its cybersecurity responsibility, and when we find unauthorized or unapproved software, we work very quickly to remove that. We also have lines of defense that that are sort of layered in terms of so that if you don't do very well on your first pass, there are other ways and other mitigations that we do to protect our network to try to contain any threats to our environment.
So when members of this panel have referred to agencies that have attempted to comply with the directive by removing Kaspersky software from their systems, would you concur that doesn't mean that Kaspersky is actually gone from the system?
I would say that cybersecurity is never a 100% deal, and that what we have—
If the hard drive is removed, is it a 100% deal?
Sir, I can't speak to a hypothetical computer. I think you'd have to take a look at how a computer might be, let's say, infected to decide whether the hard drive was one where you could reuse again, or if you would just decide not to put that hard drive back into your computer.
So that would require— that's an excellent answer. Thank you, Madam. And that would require further evaluation of that particular system.
You'd need to always monitor your network to make sure it's fully protected.
Very well. Thank you for your answer. Ms. Manfra, thank you for your service to your country. The Binding Operational Directive 1701, in its initial statement, calls for a 30-day period to identify the use of Kaspersky products and then a 60-day period to provide detailed plans to remove and discontinue the present and future use of the products, and then a 90-day period to begin to implement the agency plans to discontinue use and remove the products from information systems. However, there's a clause stated in there stated that unless directed otherwise by DHS based on new information, by what measure, Madam, would DHS ever determine, never mind, let's go ahead and keep this product on our systems? Why is that clause in there?
Sir, after extensive review of this process by our legal counsel, we felt that it was important to allow Kaspersky Labs and any other potentially affected entity a meaningful opportunity to respond to the decision that we had made.
So that clause is inserted into the DHS VOD 1701, the Binding Operational Directive for United States government agencies. That clause was inserted to protect Kaspersky as opposed to government agencies?
No, sir. That clause was inserted that should the Kaspersky or another commercial entity come back with new information that would result in the acting secretary reconsidering her decision, then we would issue new guidance based off of that new information.
And what could that new guidance be other than to discontinue the process of removing Kaspersky products?
That would probably be it, sir, if that was the acting secretary's decision, but it would have to be based off of new information that had previously not been understood or considered.
Mr. Chairman, I have one brief question, if you would allow.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Higgins.
Regarding code, Ms. Manfra, it's my understanding that the directive does not apply to Kaspersky code embedded in the products of other companies. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that it doesn't apply to Kaspersky code because that
The
would be...
directive applies to removal of the products, but
Correct, sir.
But what about the code left behind?
What we focused on was products that is clearly identified as Kaspersky. What we have not focused on in this directive, though we are continuing to pursue, is understanding how they may be embedded in other products that are not Kaspersky and working towards a process to address those.
And thank you for your answer, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired. I would just share that this concerning, it's exactly what we're talking about, this entire series of Kaspersky-related hearings concerns and apparently a known or reasonably suspected information security threat that the Kremlin has embedded itself in our federal systems, and may I submit that that should certainly include code. I thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Now